Hello lovelies, and welcome to my channel, or welcome back if you are returning. Now today I wanted to do another Now What video about the practicalities of reading and divination and reading tarot, reading oracle. So just to show you how I do it. So it's not necessarily a teaching video, it's just a way to share like the actual practicalities of how I approach tarot. So this morning before the school run I was pulling some tarot cards and just something jumped into my head about the way I was finding the story and kind of the steps that I go through to find the story in whatever cards that I put down in front of me. And I just thought, well, let's leave these cards out, and when I get back from the school run I will just do a video about what I just did. So the decks that are in play here, so there's the Mystical Dream Tarot, which is a deck I really love. There is a card from the Oracle of the Sacred Horse, which you will have seen me pull out and leave out in my review video. There is also, surprisingly, a card from the Sisters of the Sea Oracle. So you've got a couple of oracles and a tarot in the mix here, and that's the first point that I want to make about how to find the story. You've pulled some cards, you've got some cards in front of you. Now what? I think the first point I want to make is recognize the flow of your reading and your living in your life and the way you are as a human. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, recognize the flow is, this isn't just necessarily a now I'm going to do a reading. This was just the random card that was left on top of the flip through in my video, which I was really surprised it was the last one because it's also the backs of the cards. I'd also used it to talk about the white horse in my practice, and it just seemed really synchronicitous in that flip through review video that it was there left at the top of the pile. So I recognised that as something quite interesting, so I left it out in that video as the card to read, to give you an idea of the messages. And as I read it, I began to realise just how profound it was for a video in which I was talking about how upset and triggered I'd been by some online hate, which you do get, and how I had struggled and how I was coming back. Within that struggle over the last few weeks, there's been work for me about self-individualization, boundaries, like really looking at why somebody else's behavior could floor me for a few months, really. Lots of learning lessons for me, lots of work to do, and this card kind of echoed it when I read it. It said, where is it? Becoming triggered by judgments can no longer be your way, as well as lots of other things in there. So it kind of blew me away. So that got left out. Then yesterday I decided to pull a card. I've done a review video for this deck, and I love the artwork so much. Even though this card's still out, I decided I wanted to pull a card from this, and I pulled the Gift of the Pearl. So this is from this deck, Sisters of the Sea. So this is a completely separate oracle reading, like the very next day. So two separate readings. And it goes on to talk about like when you give your gifts, your pearls, to the correct people, they'll never be disrespected or squandered or neglected. And again, that kind of tied in with the work I'm doing behind the scenes. So we've got two completely different readings, two completely different days, but in the same week. I began to see a flow. Can you see the flow of messages here? So I think you can let your days and your readings flow into each other. Just because it's a separate reading, it doesn't mean that it needs to not be connected. There is a flow in our readings where you can start to see the message for the big picture that you're currently in or working on or trying to discover things about. Two completely different readings, just pulled without questions, just because I wanted to use the deck. Let's just see what a message for the day. There is a flow state there. So with this card then, I decided to pull some tarot cards around it to explore it further. So this was this morning's card pull. So I went to a tarot deck then. This is the Mystical Dream Tarot. So I pulled these three cards. The underlying energy, which is the card then at the bottom of the deck, was this one here. So let me just rejig this all so it is all in shot. So that's the reading that we've got. So I've pulled some cards, I've spotted the flow, but now what? So my first thing, I think I do kind of a scan of a reading with my gut punch for keywords and meanings for what I believe these tarot cards mean. So what do I mean by that? Lady of Swords or the Queen of Swords, I immediately went truth. Just jumped into my head, the truth teller, finding truth. The wisdom teacher in this deck, that's what the Hermit card is called. So I immediately went to the idea of isolating myself to go internal, so looking internally, so an internal truth. I immediately got a story forming here by connecting the cards. Then judgment, my mind went into rebirth, so I immediately said, oh, okay, so there's a truth that's inside of me that will bring a rebirth. And then I went to this card, the Five of Pentacles, which is for me that idea of being left out, being neglected, which immediately ties back into these ideas of, you know, if you're with the right people, things aren't neglected, your light is seen, you're not going to have to work so hard because you're triggered all the time. So the Five of Pentacles is about like not being stable, not having any balance, being left out in the cold, being forgotten. So the underlying energy of where this work comes from is from being neglected, being forgotten, being scapegoated. So that was what I just do immediately. That takes about 10 seconds for me, and that's just using keywords and phrases and your initial gut punch understandings of the cards. There is an internal truth I need to look at. It will bring about rebirth. It's linked to this area here. So I've immediately got a story forming using those fast keywords and phrases. But that's not the end of finding the story for my tarot reading. I then go to what's visually in front of me, so the artwork. And the artwork, I think, plays as important a role for me, whether it's because I'm visually trained or not. I don't think you need to be a trained artist to feel like this. I think it's the same for many of us. The artwork is as important as the actual meanings of the cards, or equally important, I should say. So then I come to the artwork and I read the artwork to find the story. The first thing with the artwork that jumps out at me, normally every time, is my personal associations and symbology with what's in the cards. So here I see the moon here, the crescent moon. And for me, the crescent moon is about grounding, being grounded. For a long time, I've really suffered with dissociation. It was only when I got into working with the moon and tracking the moon's position that I began to feel like the moon was sending down ropes for me to tie myself down, to ground myself. So I see a moon and I think grounding. The bell jar as well, with this shadowy figure in the bell jar, I always link with like the idea of who you fundamentally are, especially like in difficult times, like when you're depressed. I always think of that with the bell jar, because I think of Sylvia Plath's book, The Bell Jar, where she talks about the fact that you can run, you can move away, you can try and change everything, but fundamentally you are you and you go with you, and it's like being in a bell jar. The child here, I immediately thought inner child work. This is somebody bringing their inner child with them. The octopus tentacles here that these two people are sitting on, looking at this shadowy figure and this kind of goddess figure up here. In the judgment card, the octopus, you can see I've got my octopus ring on here, a massively important energy in my spiritual practice. The octopus is the energy that I tapped into when I was healing from trauma, because I call the octopus my trauma warrior energy. It's the energy that will get you through and out. It really is a symbol for me, the octopus, of surviving in against all the odds, because rebirth is one of my main key words around the judgment card. It's a rebirth after trauma, and the octopus tentacles gave me that. And then the woman, the single woman in her garden, you've got another symbol here that for me is really pertinent about surviving the unimaginable. The first old hobby that I reconnected with after trauma and after escaping trauma was my garden, to begin to grow my garden again. Here you've got the need for grounding and inner child work to really step into a place that's a lot more stable and a lot less triggered after trauma. So my own personal associations and symbology, like the octopus, the garden, the inner child, what the moon means to me, what the bell jar means to me, starts to come into play then, along with those initial hits of keywords and key phrases for the card meanings. The next thing I look at, which just comes naturally to me, is synchronicities in the cards, or things that mirror each other. So here, the woman's face, it almost looks like this is either hair or a cloak, and then you've got the woman here as well. It looks like this is viewing the woman from the front in a cloak, and this is viewing her from behind. So wherever we're going, we are going with truth, with the Lady of Swords. So we're going to have to do some introspection work for the Hermit card, and we are going to bring truth with us. Here she is again. So that's a synchronicity that made me pull that into the story. And look, it looks like she's talking to this child. So we're not going to lie to our inner child. We are really going to face the truth, no matter what, no matter how difficult it is, no matter whether you feel like you're in the bell jar, whether it makes you feel down to admit it. We might be in an area here where the truth telling and the introspection work is difficult, so we're going to throw some moon work in with this reading as well. We need to remember we found ways to stay grounded. So that came from spotting the synchronicity here between the woman's cloak. There's another cloaked figure here again, so this almost looks like death calling people into rebirth. So it can continue the story there, that there are some truths that may have been true in the past that we might need to let die, and there might be some things that we need to shift our truth on. The way out and to herald in a new future, which this figure might be calling in, is to really face the truths and to leave them behind. Look, this figure looks like they're the other side of these columns holding them up, and that makes me then begin to think that this is the past in the background here, we want to move forward past the octopus tentacles into the future, into a rebirth. And then I spotted another synchronicity. Look, there's a fish swimming away here and the fish here. So we're swimming in this direction. We want to become the woman serene and peaceful, not with a crescent moon, but with a full moon in the garden, growing flowers, lost in beauty and calmness and peace. Look, she's very, very stable, even though the fish looks like it's not so stable and the water is flowing very fast around the fish, but she's balanced. There is a balance here. And honestly, I think one of the biggest synchronicities in shape is this overall shape here with the figure, with what's going on up here at the moon. This looks like an enlarged version of this, almost like what we can see of the moon that makes it look like a crescent moon is actually this shape mirrored by the octopus tentacles. And then this figure looks like this figure. It almost looks like the wisdom teacher is telling the inner child, if you can just face this truth and get across the ocean, you will ground yourself, and then you can come through the portal to this area here. It's almost like the Lady of Swords and the wisdom teacher is literally mapping out the journey, and it seems right that it's across an ocean, because an ocean is about emotions and really tricky emotions that can make you feel unstable, but you're getting to a place of stability by jumping into the emotions. And it almost feels like she's saying, I'll come with you, and when you're there I will watch you leave. It's almost like future promising, like you can do it. So this almost becomes like the journey to and through and out the other side. And where are we getting to? We're getting to a place where it doesn't matter how difficult the waters around you become and how unbalanced it is to swim in, you can remain balanced. You can see there I've stepped kind of away from tarot meanings, although not totally. I often find, and I think this is the magic, that even if you are following purely reading the artwork and the synchronicities and the mirrors of shapes like here and here in the artwork, it still leads you in a circle back to the tarot meanings. This is still introspection and finding truth to get out and through and into a rebirth, a transformation, the transformation of the Judgment card, which is just so wonderful. And then even though this card in this deck has a slightly different meaning, it's still that idea of it doesn't matter if other people shut you out and if all the water around you is rocky, you have a place with you that can remain stable. So the messages and the tarot messages are still there. Even if you go off on a wild tangent, 9 times out of 10 you'll find that it still brings you back home to the tarot. So for me, that is the biggest synchronicity of shapes, and looking at that synchronicity, it does provide me with a map. And I actually think, you know, I've been wondering whether I've not been a little bit depressed because I haven't been out in the garden yet. I've been out once and it's completely overgrown. It's not being watered. And I wonder, you know, whether my first action point, because I also love the action points, like how do I put this now in practice? This might not be screaming at me, go out in the garden. The garden saved me before. It can certainly pull me out of the slump I've been in now. So I think my action point, guys, is screaming me in the face, and that's from reading the artwork. So we've got there now a combination. We've got personal symbols and synchronicities and what those symbols mean to us. So that might be different for everybody. We've got our understanding of the meanings of the cards combined in. We've also got the synchronicities of the different card images all coming together and combining to tell us a story. Then I would go to the guidebook. I am never one to say, oh, you know, don't check the guidebook, especially with a deck like the Mystical Dream Tarot, because this can sometimes, and often does, step away from the traditional meaning of the cards. So even if you're a really well-versed tarot reader, don't feel like somehow it's cheating or like makes it look like you don't know what you're doing to go to the guidebook. You've chosen this deck for a reason. This deck is in front of you for a reason, and I believe a lot of the time those deck choices are really magical. That's why I think the artwork is sometimes as important, or sometimes more important, for finding the story than just the card meanings. And again, with the write-ups in the guidebooks, I think sometimes it throws in just a nugget that absolutely transforms a reading. So I will go to the guidebook and I will read what the guidebook has to say, to see what also can be combined in. And that's exactly what happened when I went to the guidebook for this reading. So the Lady of Swords, or the Queen of Swords, it says in a reading, it talks about her ability to take care of oneself past misfortune, sorrow, abandonment, loss. She is self-actualized, deeply aware. The truth is, it doesn't matter what others do, what others say. The truth is that you have the power to still decide, your faith, to be self-actualized, to not be triggered, which is what this card threw me into working on, like how to self-actualize, how to not be swayed by others, how to know that you've got the pearl. It also says that she is in a fiery awakening. You can see the flames around, but the fact that it's used the word fiery awakening, it ties in with the Judgment card here. It does begin to confirm to me that this is about waking up to a truth so that I can rebirth, successful accomplishment of life's goals, and the reason for your incarnation. Basically, this is the kick in the butt card. You know, get on with your dreams, get on with your passions. Key sentences will jump out from a guidebook that go into that story. It might be that another time I pull this card, if there is a different story appearing, a different sentence will jump out. When I then came to the Judgment card, it talked about the truth of relationships are now clear. Clarity is here. Again, that word truth jumped out at me. And now is the time. Now you've got that clarity. It says it's now the time to respond to a vocation. I mean, what? I think the guidebook can give just that last little push of either twisting the story slightly differently, or confirming the story, or giving you action points. So a spoiler, guys, I did go out in the garden. I spent about an hour and a half out there trimming and clearing the patio and washing down the patio, watering the plants, and I discovered my new roses that I bought last year are in flower. I hadn't even noticed those, and it was so uplifting and so wonderful. It did feel like coming back home to myself. It felt like the culmination of this reading. And to talk about as well, to go back to the first thing I mentioned about being in the flow, finding the flow of readings. Also, after I finished filming the first part of this video, a friend from TarotTube, who's got a channel, she'll know who she is, messaged me and said, "You seem sad. What's going on? Just sad in general. Talk to me, because I know you haven't got many people to talk to." And we just got chatting about finding joy and how to step out of being down and back into joy and curating friendships, curating joy in our lives. And she started talking to me about her summer solstice celebrations in her garden, and she sent me pictures. And again, it was the same message. It was the same message. It comes in everywhere if you pay attention. Get out in the garden, Candy. It's summer solstice. Get out and transform. So it kind of brought this whole reading over the last few days full circle, and I ended up in my garden and I felt transformed. So guys, that's it. I hope you find that helpful. I love finding the story in tarot, which, as you've seen, goes way beyond tarot meanings. It brings in lots of other things, lots of synchronicities, lots of magic. I think the synchronicities is where you'll find the magic when you read tarot. I hope that's helped. I hope you enjoyed that, and I'll see you next time. Bye.